It's a winter day in an Indian city, then part of the British Empire, less than 25 kilometers to the border with Nepal, where Europeans live separately from the locals, and where the largest business is opium trade. He is born to a family of a 46-year-old officer of the opium department, while his mother is 28 and already has a daughter of 5. His first word has been beastie. It's more about his mother's world rather than his conscious speaking, of course. On his father's side there are West Indian slave owners and minor aristocrats, while on his mother's there are French colonials, shipbuilders and merchants who settled in India. It all confuses him about what his attitude to the grandparents is supposed to be, but by this time he has already discovered French literature and is ready to embrace it. His journey started in India, but it was not where the discovery took place. Afraid of unsanitary conditions and a bunch of diseases there, his mother took the children to Hen-on-Thames near London when the younger had turned 1. In 5 years, the boy will find himself surrounded by his mom, 2 sisters, and nuns from a local Catholic school, but still terribly alone. 5 years difference between siblings is a huge gap for children. There are no boys to spend his time with. He has seen his dad just a couple of times and does not even remember him. In 3 years, at the age of 8, he would move for the second time in his life to become a student of the public school in Eastbourne. He sincerely hates the school, which was the best choice his mother could afford with all her connections. And he lives here. There are only boys in the school, and it appears that all students come from much wealthier families, so Eric is again out of game. His family has moved one more time and settled close to the previous place, but he comes back home only for school holidays. In one of such trips he would find his father at home, but would not particularly enjoy the experience. He suddenly becomes confronted by a gruff, elderly man, forever saying, don't. What he loves as a 10-year-old child is literature and the outdoor life. He's free to go fishing or bird watching or buy a rifle to go shooting. There was no government control of the gun ownership in those days. Or climb the hedge and stand on his head, just to attract some attention from other people. That's actually how he met his best childhood friends, children of the Buddicombe family, and his first love, Jacinta, one of the Buddicombe sisters. She's 2 years older, but was feeling easy with the boy who knew a lot and didn't seem to need a big company. They both enjoyed reading and often exchanged books, making them also gifts for holidays. Thus, when given a book about ghosts and vampires, Eric, as a careful friend, would add a crucifix and a clove of garlic for Jacinta to keep the dark forces away. They two dreamt about entering Oxford University without knowing yet that for none of them the dream would become true. Eric stuck to a different plan, to become a famous author, like that, in capitals. He was expelled from a school for his trick on a town server, while random advertisers would still occasionally become victims of his pranks. He then became a student of the Eton College, where Aldous Huxley, 11 years older, was one of his teachers of French. His family moved once again, but they didn't break communication with Jacinta. He continued sharing stories he had come up with, and she enjoyed it. They wrote and exchanged poetry, and when already after the First World War it was time to plan their lives after college, the 18-year-old young man wrote several verses to communicate his real feelings, but the girl viewed the lines only as a subject for practical criticism. Well, that's helpful for his dream, but was not his real intention. When his family made the final decision that Eric was going to join the Imperial Police in India, where one of his grandmothers was still living, He proposed to Jacintha and asked her to join him in the trip to Burma. Either afraid of the unknown perspectives or just with the lack of patience for a young man without higher education, she refused. Next October, he would appear as a passenger on a ship heading to the Mandalay Police Training School. He spent 4 years as a police officer in Mandalay and then moved to Mol Mine where his grandma was residing. He easily learned the Burmese language, quickly adopted common appearance of the locals including tattoos and pencil mustache, but was still separated from the community, mainly because of being English. So when he contracted a tropical disease, they allowed him to come back to England, and he decided to quit the police service. Eric stuck to a different plan: to become a famous author in capitals. He moved to London from the family home in Southwold and would move a dozen times more within and outside the city, by public transport and on foot, to take anything from a well-furnished flat to a tiny cottage with no facilities. There he reached Ruth Peter, a woman who was a bit older and who had already published her first book of poetry. A friend of Eric's parents, she tried to support the young man with a piece of advice and critical reviews of his writing. And her recommendation was to write about what he himself knew. Hence, to enrich the knowledge, dressed like a tramp, he spent nights in a common lodging house, and even got drunk and incapable to be arrested and be able to taste that life of a prisoner on Christmas, all for search. He entered the poorer circles in London under a fictional name, while in everyday life, to earn his living, he was Eric Arthur Blair, a dishwasher, a hope picker, a bookstore clerk, a teacher, and finally an editor and a journalist. And at no point of the way he would stop writing. His plan was to become a famous author. Something was published, some works were rejected, while Eric Blair, which he didn't like as an author's name, was describing everything he knew: colonial society in Burma, life of the poor in England and France, and life at the front line based on his experiences during the Spanish Civil War. Started practically the same week he got married. It's there he survived a sniper's bullet sent into his throat, without knowing yet that he would get tuberculosis the same year, his father would die in the following year, in 2 years the Second World War would break out, and that one day he would become a famous author. Now though, despite his will, he cannot join the army because of the health condition. So he keeps working as a journalist, spending time in the BBC radio studio, as well as staying close to the troops as a war journalist. And on this occasion he also meets Ernest Hemingway. Apart from factual writing, he was looking for a way to create a fictional story, probably about the Soviet regime, so that it could be easily understood and translated to many languages. He came up with The Animal Farm, but the manuscript appeared lost in the ruins of his house after it had been hit by a German flying bomb. He spent hours on the search of the pages and managed to restore the novel. It was published right after the war and brought him immediate fame. He has just become a famous author, George Orwell, the pen name he had been using for more than 10 years already. The book became popular and one day reached Jacintha Buddicombe. The style seemed familiar to the woman and reminded her Eric Blair's stories. Now they both were in their 40s and Jacintha had no idea that her childhood friend Eric Blair, finally a famous author, was indeed the real author of the novel. A few years later, after his another novel 1984 had been published, they even restored communication with Jacintha and were trying to find a perfect time for a meeting on the Jura Island, where George was staying at the moment. Each of them wrote a book of their memories from the times when they were young. And who knows if the world would ever know him as a famous author if one day his mother didn't decide to take her children to a different side of the British Empire.